Hey, welcome back, Faithful Politics listeners and watchers. If you're watching our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. We don't say that at the beginning of every
I know.
episode because we always forget.
It's lame.
But like and subscribe. The button is somewhere around here.
Here.
I'm your political host, Will Wright, joined by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram, and we are joined today by Dr. Kaylen Silverberg. He is the medical director of the Texas Fertility Center in Austin, Texas, and chairs the advisory board of Americans for IVF, which is a newly formed national organization dedicated to education surrounding IVF. And we're so happy to have you with us, Doctor. Well, thanks for being here.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.
And I gotta say I'm super excited for this conversation because when it comes to a lot of the topics that we talk about on our show, either Josh or myself will know quite a bit about one side or the other. I know nothing about IVF. And it's in the news a lot lately, so it's really, really awesome that you're here to kind of help educate us. But I'd love to know how does one get into the IVF business and make it a career?
Well, it's concerning to me because I was told that you guys were the experts in IVF and you were going to teach me all about it. So
awkward.
So how does one get into the IVF business? So you have to go to medical school. So 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, 4 years of an OB-GYN residency, during which time we're taught to deliver babies, do hysterectomies, fix bladders, do all the other stuff that, that women need to provide women's health care. And then beyond that, you do a 3-year fellowship in just infertility and reproductive endocrinology. So we have the worst named specialty in all of medicine. We're called reproductive endocrinologists. That means nothing to the overwhelming majority of the population. So let me tell you what we really do. We really do 3 things. Number 1 is infertility. That makes up the overwhelming majority of most of our practices. The second thing that we do is we take care of women with recurrent pregnancy loss. In other words, 3 or more pregnancy losses. They are able to conceive, but they can't carry and deliver a baby. And then the final thing that we do is complicated endoscopic, like laparoscopic or hysteroscopic surgery. So we take care of endometriosis, fibroid tumors, polyps, ovarian masses, things like that.
That's fascinating. IVF is one of those things that I have heard about personally from several friends that have used it, and to varying degrees of success. And it's always obviously with, when you're dealing with pregnancy, when you're dealing with these issues of having children, it's so personal, it's so deeply intimate that it can be, walking with someone through that can be one of the most joyful and also one of the most devastating, experiences for them working through that. And obviously, I know that you know that better than most anyone and the work that you're in. But it seems to raise IVF ethical concerns. It seems to raise controversy. And I guess I don't really understand what the controversy is about. I have some idea, but I'd love to hear from an expert,
Sure.
What it actually is, IVF, and what do you think drives this moral divide between people that fully support it and those who think it's ethically questionable?
Well, so to answer you asked like 17 questions in that one question. So to answer question number 17
yes.
First, what drives the controversy is lack of understanding. It's lack of knowledge, lack of understanding. It's a misunderstanding of basic human physiology. And I'm not trying to be negative or critical, but that's what it is, right? So people who don't understand physiology believe, honestly and erroneously so, that if a man and a woman have sex mid-cycle without contraception, that cycle will result in a pregnancy and will result in the birth of a healthy baby. They don't understand that the inherent human physiology is incredibly inefficient. So let me put some numbers around that so you'll understand, okay? If you have a man and a woman who've had a baby together with each other in the past, and the woman is 35 years of age or younger, so she's what we would categorize as young or in the prime of her reproductive life, and we know everything works, right? They've had a baby together with each other. So her tubes are open, her uterine cavity's normal, she ovulates, she makes chromosomally normal eggs, her partner's got good sperm, everything works. If they have well-timed intercourse mid-cycle, reality is their chance for pregnancy is 20%. A quarter of those pregnancies will miscarry. So their chance of producing a baby when everything is perfect in any given month is 15%. So the inherent system that we're working in fails 85% of the time. Okay? Now, what I mean by that is, why does it fail? Well, so a woman may ovulate, or first of all, a woman may not ovulate. It's normal for women who do ovulate regularly to occasionally have a cycle that runs long, and maybe they didn't ovulate that month. All of the eggs that were developing in that cycle die. Okay, no recycling. I come from Austin, Texas. We believe in recycling. There's no recycling. When you burn through those 50 or 100 eggs in any given month, they're gone. Sometimes you ovulate and the egg isn't picked up by the fallopian tube. Those eggs die naturally. Sometimes you ovulate, the egg is picked up by the fallopian tube. It travels down the tube. Sperms see it, they head for it, but they don't bind, they don't dock, and there's no fertilization. Those sperm and eggs die. Sometimes the egg comes down, it is fertilized, but yet when it goes down into the uterus, it doesn't attach. That embryo dies. It's a fertilized egg. Sometimes the embryo goes down to the uterus, it attaches, but it miscarries. That embryo then dies. All of that together makes up 85% of all cycles. The cycles where your wife, your partner, your sister, your really good friend gets pregnant and has a baby, that represents 15% of the cycles. So there's a basic lack of understanding of human physiology. People think that that embryos only die in IVF laboratories. Okay? Quantumly more embryos die in nature every single month than die in every IVF laboratory on the planet Earth in a year. Okay? So there's a basic misunderstanding of physiology. Why is there or what are the controversies? The controversies are myriad. I mean, I hear it thrown at me all the time. IVF is the unregulated Wild West. Well, that would be true if I ignored the 13 federal, state, local agencies that oversee my laboratories. Okay? Everybody from the state of Texas medical board examiners who approve my license and give me a license that I've got to renew every year. The American Board of OB-GYN, who oversees whether I'm board certified or whether I'm not. The Federal Food and Drug Administration that makes unexpected, unannounced surprise visits in my laboratory to go through all of our books and records to make sure that every donor that we use, donor egg, donor sperm, donor embryo, gestational carrier, to make sure all that fits. We fall under CLIA. Okay, so the government can come and inspect our laboratory anytime they want to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing. We have to have a business license to be able to operate a business. We have to have a medical license. I mean, all of these agencies oversee what we're doing. Okay, so people who say that we're the unregulated Wild West, unfortunately, don't understand. And I think that that's, I'm an optimist. I'm an eternal optimist. I believe that anybody can be educated, and they still may come up with a conclusion that I don't personally disagree with. But unlike what happens in the world and on television all day, every day now, I have respect for people that I don't agree with. I ask for them to respect me as well, because I think that intelligent human beings can be informed and can have really intelligent conversations. And I'm not a sensationalist, but I have to deal with the sensational stuff all the time. A bad apple in reproductive endocrinology uses his own sperm to fertilize a bunch of, eggs in a laboratory. That's horrible. It's indefensible. It's awful. We can all agree on that. No reason to have controversy about it. Everybody agrees it's horrible. Nobody out there is waving a flag saying, yeah, do it again. That's great. It just doesn't happen unless you're just totally psychopath, right? But there are other controversies. And what led to this whole issue coming to the forefront now is what happened in the state of Alabama. So what happened is you had a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Alabama who is obviously very devout in his beliefs, came out and said, I think what he was really trying to say was, there are a whole lot of extra embryos being created in IVF. These embryos are being electively destroyed, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think that's what he was really trying to say, okay? But he used his position to make that a legal issue in the state of Alabama. And so what happened was he said these things. He cast doubt on the safety in the minds of couples going through IVF in Alabama. Is it okay to produce embryos in Alabama? What happens if we have abnormal embryos? Can we discard them? Can we not discard them? He really created a lot of controversy. And as far as 99% of your viewers or listeners know, that's the end of the story. Alabama is a mess, and this is spreading all over the world, or all over the United States in a contagion. What they don't know, unfortunately, is the second half of the story. And the second half of the story is it took a matter of days for both houses of the Alabama legislature to draft, write, vote on, and pass legislation that basically undid what the Alabama Supreme Court did. And within 15 minutes of that legislation arriving on the governor's desk, it was signed into law. So what unfortunately 99% of people know is the first half of the story. They don't know the second half of the story. So this is what happens, and this is what we deal with every day.
I recall that particular situation because I know because it was sort of a religiously inspired type of ruling. We had on the guest somebody that we've had on before, Matthew Taylor, who kind of broke down sort of the belief system of this particular person, and they believe in this 7 mountain mandate dominionism. I won't bore you with all the details, but yeah, it's pretty wild, and it's probably going to grow, to be honest with you, like depending on the direction this country is going. But I love it if you can maybe articulate, are there different types of IVF, or is it basically all the same? And the only reason I'm asking you this is because the running mate for VP Harris came out, said that him and his wife had
used IVF.
Yeah, and he had a backtrack or something, and
right,
again, I don't
use IUI. Right.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it. So can you talk about maybe the different types?
Absolutely. And I don't think that he intentionally misspoke. I think that he may have even been confused himself, because we use a lot of acronyms and a lot of initials, and he used IUI, not IVF. Okay, well, what's the difference between IUI and IVF? I mean, when you look at it, they're both 3 letters. They both start with an I. It's easy to confuse them, but in fact, they're totally different things. So the Catholic Church approves of IUI. What is IUI? IUI stands for intrauterine insemination. So when a woman is ready to ovulate, we get sperm from the male. Okay, we wash it in a laboratory to separate the good sperm, the good, fast-moving, healthy sperm from the debris and the dead stuff. And then we painlessly insert a little catheter through the woman's cervix into her uterus, push the specimen, squirt the specimen basically into the uterus, take the catheter out. She lays still for 10 minutes, goes right back to work. It's totally painless. Okay, and that's IUI. And the reason the Catholic Church approves of that is because you can collect the specimen by having intercourse with a condom that's got a hole in the tip of it. That the Catholic Church is okay with that, because there is a chance for natural conception. You then bring the condom into the laboratory. We wash it. We get the sperm out of that. We prepare it. We put the sperm back into the woman's body, and then fertilization occurs in the body. Okay, and pregnancy results. So the Catholic Church is actually fine with all that. IVF is different. With IVF, we give the woman injections of fertility drugs to cause her to make many eggs. Now, I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but the bottom line is, suffice it to say, women don't make one egg per month. They think they do because they typically ovulate only one egg per month. But where they are in their reproductive lifespan, if they're 15 or 16, they may make 300 eggs in a given month. If they're 45, they may make one egg every other month. Okay? But we give fertility, and through some complicated endocrinologic game, the leading egg wins the game, and the result is the sperm or the egg gets to come out and play with the sperm. And all the other eggs that started to develop in that given month die a fiery, horrible death in the ovary, never to be heard from again. They're gone. Right? Again, no recycling. So with IVF, what we do is we give the woman injections of very powerful fertility drugs that cause all of those eggs not to die. Okay? So it causes maybe 8, maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 30, depending upon how old the woman is, of those eggs to continue to develop. We monitor those eggs' development with a vaginal ultrasound every couple of days and a blood estrogen level to make sure that those eggs, to the best of our ability, are healthy. We then give a trigger shot, and exactly 36 hours after that hormonal trigger injection, we take the woman to the operating room. She's given some IV sedation, so for about 8 minutes, she's on a beach in the Caribbean drinking margaritas. We do an ultrasound. We pass a needle through the top of the vagina into the ovaries under ultrasound guidance. We remove each egg, and that's it for the woman. She's done. She wakes up, she goes to the recovery room, she's there for about 45 minutes, she goes home, sleeps it off, goes back to work. Okay? While we're collecting eggs from her, we're collecting sperm from the man. We process it in the laboratory, and 5 hours after we get the eggs out, either we add 15,000 moving sperm to a droplet of fluid containing each egg, or we can actually pick up a single sperm with a microscopic needle and inject that sperm directly into the egg. We do that for guys who've got really low sperm counts or really abnormal sperm or very low performing sperm in the tests that we do. So then we look under, the next day we look under the microscope 18 hours after we add the sperm to the eggs, and we can determine which eggs have fertilized and which eggs have not. Eggs that don't fertilize are dead, so we can discard them. We take the eggs that have fertilized, we put them into a different culture media, put them back in the incubator, and grow them for up to 7 days in the laboratory. On day 5, 6, or 7 after we fertilize them, we look under a microscope. When those fertilized eggs or embryos reach a stage of development called the expanded blastocyst stage, which is the furthest stage we can grow an embryo in the laboratory, we can actually put the embryo under the microscope, drill a hole in the outer membrane of the embryo with a laser, open up a hole, pull out 3 to 5 cells from this 128 cell embryo, freeze the embryo at 400 degrees below zero, freeze the cells at 400 degrees below zero, then send the cells off to our testing facility in California. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, we'll get a report back and they'll say, okay, embryo number 1 is a normal male. Number 2 is a male with Down syndrome. Number 3 is a normal female. Number 4 is a female missing chromosome number 6. So we know which embryos are normal, which embryos are chromosomally abnormal. Typically, programs discard the embryos that are chromosomally abnormal and incompatible with life. Okay, so in our program, for example, we don't destroy Down's embryos because Down syndrome is compatible with life. We don't destroy Turner syndrome because Turner syndrome is compatible with life. But if we have an embryo that's got a whole extra set of chromosomes or an extra number 8 or number 15, things that for which there's never been a case of a living baby, making it down the road towards adulthood, we can discard those embryos. In Texas, even with a heartbeat bill that we have, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes if you're interested, we're still allowed to do that. Okay, because there's no developed baby, there's no heartbeat in the uterus. So those are the differences between IVF and IUI, for example.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, because that's really, really helpful. And I do want to hear more about the heartbeat bill, but before you talk about that, can you maybe help me better understand, like, this is probably going to sound weird, but like where life begins. Because, you know, a lot of the argument, whether it's IVF or abortion or whatever, you know, there's always talk, well, you know, life starts at conception, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And I don't, and I'm curious, is there like a medical definition, or is it
No.
just very subjective?
So I actually put together a presentation once upon a time entitled "When Does Life Begin?" And I started off by being totally irreverent, and I was younger and I was more immature than I am now. And I said, you know, I started off my talk by saying, I am so grateful for the Supreme Court of the United States and the Catholic Church, because I do this all day, every day. I have no idea when life begins. And thank God I don't need to worry about it anymore, because they figured it out for me, you know? But it's really complicated, and there's no answer. There's absolutely no answer. I don't care who tells you that they know when life begins. No one knows when life begins. If I show you a moving sperm, okay, a sperm going across the screen, that's a one cell structure. It's moving, it's metabolizing, okay? And yet it's not considered life until it fertilizes an egg, right? So you tell me that that sperm is not alive, because I disagree. I think that sperm is alive, but I don't think that means life. You know, when you fertilize an egg, I mean, the question is, what is life? Does life mean that there is detectable activity, or does life mean that that structure, that embryo, that infant can live on its own without being medically supported? So I can tell you, I can see that sperm going across the screen, but unless we do something with it, in a matter of hours, it will die. Okay, I see that egg, but unless it fertilizes within 24 to 48 hours, it will die. I see that embryo, but unless we freeze it or transfer it into a woman's uterus within 7 days of the time it was fertilized, it will die. I see that baby developing in a woman's uterus with a heartbeat. Okay, but if that woman delivers that baby at 8 weeks, it's called a miscarriage. 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, 18 weeks, 20 weeks, it's called a miscarriage. If that woman goes into the hospital at term, the day that baby is supposed to be born, and that baby has died in utero because of a cord accident, or the umbilical or the placenta came off the wall of the uterus, or she got an infection, that baby is dead. That baby is not alive. So I don't know when life begins.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's such a complicated question, and I think that's why, you know, you have the medical parts of it and you have the philosophical parts of it, and they're all interacting, and you have the theological parts of it, which of
Absolutely.
course they had no idea, the Bible writers, about the process of fertilization.
Right.
And in any sense like we do, right? They had some vague sense of seed and vague sense of it growing, right? And pregnancy, and they'd see a seed and they plant it in the ground and grow. So by analogy, you know, you can assume maybe something happens. Same thing with life, and but nothing like the complicated way that we understand these physiological processes at at such a minute level. And you know, it's such an interesting idea of trying to figure out, like, what is it about this that is so controversial. And because it's an amazing technology that's helped so many people. I mean, it's unbelievable. And yet with it, in order to do that, there has to be some destruction of, you know, some kind of a life adjacent, whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, it's some kind of biological, right, cells, and no one's worried about their skin cells dying and falling off. We're not being upset about that. And
Right.
yet there's something that feels different about this.
Right.
Why do you think that the pro-life movement has attached to this, like IVF, or has become so, even the Catholic Church's rejection of it? Aaron, what, what do you think is going on there? Have you talked with Catholic doctors? What do they think about that are in IVF? Like, what's going on? I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, nobody worries about what happens physiologically, right? I mean, I told you, the overwhelming majority of eggs never see the light of day. I mean, a woman is born, when a woman is 20 weeks, when she's a 20-week fetus in her mother's uterus, she has 15 to 20 million eggs. Okay, by the time she's born, she only has 6 to 7 million eggs left. By the time she goes through puberty, she may only have 300,000 to 500,000 eggs left. So every woman in her body kills off maybe 10 to 15 million eggs. No one's concerned about that. A guy ejaculates, and if those sperm don't go and fertilize an egg, all those sperm have died. Nobody cares about that. Okay, so it's only after the sperm and the egg unite at some point in time that different people think life is actually happening. And that's where I think their focus is. And I honestly, if you want my honest opinion, I think that it's a lack of understanding of physiology, a lack of understanding of the process. There may be some people who blindly just accept what they believe. I'm totally fine with that. I think that it's not my job to educate them, and maybe they're right and I'm wrong. We're not going to know until we can't do anything about it, right? I mean, at some point in time, we may learn who was right and who was wrong. Great. Congratulations. Okay. But I just don't think that is really germane to the discussion now. And people are trying to do, I honestly believe that people are really trying to do the best they can to understand some things that are not understandable. Okay. And so they use whatever tools they have at their disposal to help them arrive at conclusions that they are comfortable with or that are compatible with their values. And I really believe that a lot of people who are opposed to IVF, they just don't understand. I mean, for us to make, it depends on the woman's age. But for example, if a woman comes in, we need, and wants to do IVF, we need to get, if she's 30 years of age or so, or younger, we need to get about 8 eggs to give us a reasonable likelihood of making one chromosomally normal embryo. If she's 35, we may need to get 10 or 12 eggs to give her a reasonable likelihood of having one embryo that's viable. If she's 40, we may need to get 10 or 15 eggs, maybe even more than that, to give her a reasonable likelihood of having one viable baby. In the old days, when I started doing this, it was 30 years ago, the chance of success with IVF was 12%. 88% of the time, despite our best efforts, people would go through an IVF cycle, wouldn't be able to get pregnant. So what did we do? We thought, aha, we have a solution for that. Let's put in 2 embryos or 3 embryos or 4 embryos. Okay. Most of the time, women still didn't get pregnant, but occasionally there were disasters where people would have 4 babies or 3 babies. Okay. Fortunately, as science has improved over the last 30 years, now we're at the point where you give me one chromosomally normal embryo, and we can give our patients a 60% chance of having a baby with one chromosomally normal embryo. So it's very complex. There's a whole lot of issues that are involved. The whole issue about embryo destruction, what people don't understand, we don't have an assembly line in our IVF laboratory that marks an embryo for destruction and we toss it. Okay. We have a physiologic process. Like I said before, maybe 3/4 of the eggs that we get fertilized. The quarter that don't fertilize die. We discard them. They're dead. We didn't kill them. They didn't fertilize, just like in nature, they wouldn't have fertilized, and we discard them. Those eggs that do fertilize, that go on to divide, but don't make it to be expanded blastocysts, which is the farthest along stage we can grow an embryo in the laboratory, those embryos die also. We didn't kill them. They died a natural physiologic death, probably because they were chromosomally abnormal and they didn't make it. We freeze embryos at 400 degrees below zero. We thaw those embryos. Okay, 96 to 97% of the embryos that we freeze survive being thawed. You can claim that we killed off those other 3 to 4%. I would say to you those 3 to 4% probably were defective, and that during the process of freezing and thawing, the membrane failed to keep fluid out, and the embryo was destroyed or stopped growing. So I think there's a common misconception about all of these embryos that we're discarding. Do we occasionally have situations where couples develop more embryos than they want? Absolutely. Okay. It is their legal right, if they want to, even in Texas, they can discard those embryos at their whim. I can't discard them because those embryos don't belong to me in Texas. We're the fiduciary. We take care of those embryos, but those embryos belong to John Doe and Sally Smith. And if they decide that they want to destroy those embryos, there's nothing I can do about it. That's Texas law that allows that to happen. Okay? I understand people's concerns with that. I really do. And that's why we offer all of our couples the option to donate those embryos. Okay, we have lots of couples who can't afford to do in vitro fertilization. Okay, and they have no access to eggs or embryos. So being able to give the gift of an embryo that you are donating to another couple, is remarkable. You think it's really important to be able to donate a liver or donate a spleen or donate a kidney, donate a lung. That's incredible. Donating a whole embryo, just as incredible.
Doctor, how much does IVF cost? And second question is, President Trump had suggested that he would work towards making IVF free to anybody that would want it if he wins the presidency. And how feasible would that actually be?
Sure. So I can tell you let me answer the first question first. How much does IVF cost? The cost depends to some degree on the woman's age. Not that we charge more for older women, but older women have fewer eggs and we have to give them more medicine to get their eggs to develop. And the medicine is probably the second most expensive part of an IVF cycle. So if I tell you that an IVF cycle retail for the average couple is around $20,000, okay? $5,000 to $6,000 of that is medicine. All right. If a woman is 42, 43 years old, she may spend $12,000 or $13,000 on medicine. All the rest of the costs remain the same. The ultrasounds are the same price no matter how old she is. The surgery center charges the same no matter how old she is. The IVF laboratory charges the same. The genetics testing laboratory charges the same. The anesthesiologist charges the same. Well, the difference is how much medicine she takes, and that can be quantumly different.
Is that normally covered by insurance?
No. To some degree, this is where I'm heading. To some degree, things are covered by insurance. And you guys are frozen. I don't know if you can see me moving and if you can hear me or not.
I can see you. Yeah, just fine.
I can see you.
Right. That's just my system. But anyway, long story short, imagine a system under which you've got Blue Cross Blue Shield or United or Aetna or Cigna or whoever, it doesn't matter. And God forbid you feel a lump in your breast and you're a woman and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, well, yes, we've diagnosed now you've got breast cancer. Your insurance company doesn't cover anything else. Good luck to you. We hope that you can survive chemotherapy if you can afford it, or surgery if you can afford it, or radiation if you can afford it. There would be a civil war in the United States if that happened. But that doesn't happen because cancer is considered something that's legitimate that government and insurance should pay for. When it comes to fertility treatment, it's different. For years and years and years, there was this belief that our patients had an elective problem. Okay, well, I got news for you. My patients didn't choose to stand in the infertility line any more than Susie Smith chose to stand in the breast cancer line, right? And then there's an argument that, people who don't have infertility shouldn't be forced to pay for other people's fertility care. Well, let's examine that. My patients don't have babies, yet part of their insurance premiums are going to pay for pediatric care for their colleagues who work at the same company.
Interesting.
Okay. They're going to pay for smoking related illnesses, lung cancer, et cetera, et cetera. My patients don't smoke. Okay. So there is a history in the United States insurance industry of people paying for services they don't need, but other people do who are in their pool. Okay. So what the Americans for IVF did, we helped draft a bill that's dropped now to the floor of the House of Representatives. We're getting more and more co-sponsors every day, which is very exciting to us. And what this bill does is we are trying to get insurance companies to pay for fertility related services.
Mm.
And if insurance companies don't do it, we're trying to ask the government to pay for it. So we hired a very exclusive economics consulting firm, and we got them to look into what this would actually cost. And what they determined was that it would cost the average employee of a company who's got health insurance 56 cents a month to cover the cost of fertility treatment for the rest of the country. Okay, so for less than a cup of Starbucks coffee, okay, we can basically get this covered.
That's remarkable. And all this stuff brings so much context, which is so important because I hear IVF and I don't even know. All I know is it stands for in vitro fertilization. And I don't know anything else about it until now, really learning about it. And the context is so important. And you were starting to allude to this, right? Well, not just allude, you were directly addressing it. But where do you see the issues? Like we have the insurance, but where do you see the issues with the government and the government's involvement in IVF and the process? And what is the ideal involvement of the government, in your opinion, in the IVF process?
That's a real tough one. That's a real tough one because I'm not a big believer personally in mandates. I understand trying to hold insurance companies' feet to the fire. I want my patients to be treated like everybody else. I want them to get coverage for the disease that they have. Okay. And if it requires a mandate to get there, I guess it requires a mandate to get there. In general, as I said before, I believe that's part of the reason that I choose to raise my family in the United States of America, because we have freedoms here. We don't have government mandated care about this. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. We have recommendations, and we give people the right to, deliberate themselves or with their families about those recommendations and decide what to do. Should I get a COVID vaccine? Should I not get a COVID vaccine? Should I get the new generation? Should I not? Should I get Gardasil to protect against HIV? Should I get, the flu shot? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are out there. And I believe strongly in that patients should have a right to decide what they want. And, I don't have to cram a needle into somebody's arm every time they come into my office to make sure that they're complying with the law. So I don't know the answer to that question. And personally, I quite honestly, I struggle with that myself because in general, I don't like mandates. But this is kind of a last resort here. If insurance companies would just do what they are supposed to do, and think about it. I mean, insurance, and I don't want to get too far afield in this, but, what happens? You get car insurance and you have a minor fender bender. Well, what's the first thing you think about? Oh my God, do I call my insurance company or do I not call my insurance company? I've been paying the premium for 30 years. I've never had a problem before. But now if I report this, what are they going to do? They're going to raise my rates or they may drop me. So the insurance industry, in my opinion, no offense, is twisted. It's just broken. This is why, when President Obama was talking about the fact that we have a healthcare crisis in the United States, I disagree. We have a healthcare insurance crisis in the United States. If you're sick or you're injured and you go to an emergency room, nobody is going to say to you, certainly no physician or no nurse is going to say to you, I'm sorry, let me see your insurance card. I realize you're bleeding out of your eyeballs. Okay, but if you don't have insurance, I'm so sorry, there's the door and you need to leave. It's never going to happen. If that happened, we have a healthcare crisis in the United States. Okay, but what do we have? We have a healthcare insurance crisis in the United States. because the insurance companies aren't forced to do what they're supposed to do. They have attorneys who draft their rules and regulations, their policies based on what are called the ERISA statutes. ERISA, ERISA, stands for Employee Retirement Income Security Act. Okay? So it's based on the fact that employees should have security regarding retirement and their retirement funds and the information regarding that. But yet that's been perverted so that now if an insurance company establishes their policy under the ERISA rules, they can be exempt from state law. So for example, in Texas, there is a mandate to offer coverage for infertility, not to cover it, but to offer coverage for infertility. And what that means is every health insurer that offers health insurance in the state of Texas is required by law to offer employers a rider that they can elect to purchase or not that would cover their employees for infertility care up to and including in vitro fertilization. All right. But yet certain insurance companies have drafted their rules and regulations under the ERISA statutes that allow them to be exempted from that Texas mandate. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to get insurance companies to live up to their responsibility and provide care and covered care for employees.
Yeah, I would easily sign on to any changes to the insurance industry. I mean, as a parent to a child who had a brain tumor removed 2 years ago, like if it weren't for like the generous donations of folks to our GoFundMe account,
right.
We would be in a different place today financially. So
right.
Yeah,
and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way, because what have you done? You've just, you've worked all your life. You've bought health insurance. You paid your premiums, right? And I'm not here just to rail on insurance companies. I mean, that's too easy. But it's not really what we're here for.
Yeah, I am curious though. Are the debates over IVF? Is there an intersect between like broader discussions about women's autonomy, having kind of full control over their own healthcare, abortion, stuff like that? Are there parallel arguments or similar arguments?
Well, I think that there are parallel arguments because, I mean, some of it is a question of choice, right? So certainly if you're for choice, you ought to be for pretty much all choice when it comes to healthcare, right? And if you want to say women should have a right to do what they want with their bodies in terms of terminating a pregnancy, I think women should have a right to do what they want to with their bodies in terms of being able to try and get pregnant and have a baby. Okay. I mean, people ask me all the time, are you pro-life or are you pro-choice? And I said, it depends on what question are you really asking me? Are you asking me in a political context or are you asking me in a practical context? Because if you're asking me in a practical context, who is more pro-life than a fertility doctor? Right? I mean,
Right.
What do we do all day, every day? All day, every day, we're trying to help couples be able to achieve what they've wanted since they were kids. They wanted to be parents. And that's my job. I don't build anything. I don't build buildings, and I don't, make skyscrapers or design, drugs that are going to save people's lives for generations. My job is to turn couples into parents. I mean, that's what I do. And there's nothing more pro-life than that. And it has nothing to do with politics and nothing to do with controversy and arguments or anything else. There's way too much of that. We just need to have practical conversations where people from different sides of the aisle, whatever the aisle actually is, can get together and can share their opinions without getting shouted down and without getting disrespected and without being threatened. We all need to, it's the Rodney King thing. Can't we just all get along? I mean, this is crazy. We're adult human beings and we're acting like preschoolers. And it's on topic after topic after topic. And I know that's not what you're talking to me about. You want to talk to me about IVF, but even just from an IVF perspective, it's the same thing.
Is it safe to say you are the most pro-choice, pro-lifer due to your occupation And,
Probably, and I don't have a multiple personality disorder. I'm not schizophrenic. I know who I am. I know what I believe in, and I believe in every single person on planet Earth who wants to be able to procreate should be able to do that. That should be a given right to be able to have
I
children.
love that. I think that's great.
And that shouldn't be controversial. That and kids shouldn't die before their parents. Okay? Those are two things that I believe to my absolute core we should all agree with, and we can start from there and expand outward.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's really well said. And the pro-life and the pro-choice has always seemed to me to be a way to get people stuck. It's because if you're pro-life, that implies that you don't believe in choice, which is like, wait, I don't believe in someone's right to choose in their life and choose things with their body. Like it oversimplifies, and you're pro-choice. Wait, you don't believe in life. You don't want people to live and babies to make it. I mean, it's very much right. These labels are so unhelpful, right? And they distract from the real issues,
right?
Which is like digging into the complications of what IVF even is, to start to even be able to make an educated decision in any way, because you're not going to be able to get it 100% correct. There's just no way. It's way too complicated, and there's way too much that's unknown.
Yeah.
And I'm super curious to hear from you how IVF kind of falls around ethnic lines. Like, is in general, is it more difficult for minorities to get IVF, or are there less minorities that I'm not sure if you know the information on it, and like, how does that, I guess I know that this is two questions, but how does that work? Like, with, if you're giving someone an embryo that's from a certain race, right? But people can't afford it, might be overwhelmingly from maybe people of color or something like that. But you're giving them, I mean, I guess for just to take off.
Well, it doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't work that way. They select, they select the embryo that they want. We don't just say, okay, this is an embryo, you're patient number 17, and here's embryo number 17 that goes to patient 17, and you get what you get. It doesn't work that way at all. Patients will see embryos that we've got available for donation, and they'll be able to choose whether they want those embryos or whether they don't want those embryos. But as far as access, it's a very important issue. It's a very important question. The American Society for Reproductive Medicine, the Society for Assisted Reproductive Technology, both have subcommittees that just deal with this. Okay. And there are lots of people looking at the issue of access because, if you're going to be honest and sincere, you should believe in universal access, right? I mean, everybody should be able to have access to the same things as everybody else. I don't care if you're, purple with green spots. It doesn't matter. Okay. I mean, everybody should be able to have access to the same things with the same quality of care in the same facilities with the same level of providers for the same price. I mean, that's the way that it should be if you really believe in universal access. So in my program, we have a private practice program. We're not a university program where we don't receive any tax dollars to do anything that we do. We charge below market rates. I can tell you, you do IVF, not to plug Texas Fertility, but I'll plug Texas Fertility.
Go ahead,
please. If you want top flight fertility care and you want to pay less than the average, you'll come to see us. And plus, we're nice people in a nice place. But the bottom line is, I know of programs, colleagues of mine, where there's a huge African American population, for example, that has problems getting access to care. And that's not fair. That's not right. Okay. And so, I mean, I'm telling you right here the way it is. I believe in universal access, period, paragraph. And universal access would be devastating to the physicians in my specialty, because think about it. There are states right now that have mandates that require all insurance companies to cover all fertility treatment, including IVF. The physicians in those states saw their reimbursements go down by about 2/3 when those laws passed. So they've got to work 3 times as hard to make the same amount of money. So why would I be advocating for that? I mean, I'd have to be kind of stupid to advocate for that, except for the fact that it's the right thing to do. And the reason you advocate for things that aren't in your best interest sometimes is because it's the right thing to do.
That's really good. And you've been piecing this together the whole time, but I want to just give a chance, and I would love for to bring it into one question. I sense your passion. I see it. I see the work that you're doing. I think it's awesome. What drives you and motivates you? And again, you've given us bits and pieces, you've talked about it, but why is this so important to you? Why is this
I'm looking at
your mission in life?
I'm looking around my office. Well, I'm looking around my office because I've got cards and notes and everything else. I mean, I could show you my cell phone. I get pictures. I get text messages that you wouldn't believe. I'm at dinner with my wife the other night, okay? And I get a picture of a baby, okay? And that baby is 6 hours old. But the parents thought enough on a Saturday night to think, gee, I bet Silverberg would love to see a picture of our baby. And that's exactly what I would love. As much as I love having dinner with my wife, to be able to sit down and see interrupted, dinner is interrupted by a picture that comes through on my text messages, and I get the look, put your phone down, pay attention.
We all know the look.
I see on there a picture of a brand new baby, and there is nothing. I mean, I don't mean to disrespect anybody else's occupations or what they do for a living or what they believe. There is nothing better than that.
I love that. I really do love that. Well, how can people, one, learn more about IVF, the work you're doing, and just, get engaged if it's something that's really important to them?
That'd be great. So go to Americans for IVF. Go to our website. Just Google Americans for IVF. We're a new organization, but we are a group of passionate people. I'll tell you that. And we've got some tireless folks, tireless folks. I think I work a lot. These guys are crazy. I mean, they work all the time on this, and it's really important. You want to learn more about fertility and treatment in general, go to txfertility.com, TX like Texas, fertility.com. We've got an amazing website put together by an incredible marketing company, and we will teach you anything you want to know about infertility, soup to nuts.
And you mentioned earlier about a bill in Congress right now. Is part of the work that your organization to advocate, to lobby, to kind of get stuff like this across the finish line? And if so,
right,
what's the name of the bill, and should our listeners be calling their congressperson?
Yeah, please. It's the HOPE. Yeah, the HOPE with the Fertility Services Act. And so we really are trying to educate the public. Right now we're trying to educate our legislators, because we're trying to get as many of them as possible to sign on as co-sponsors. We're really proud of the fact that I think we're up to like 18 or 19 co-sponsors now, which is great. Surprisingly, far more Republicans than Democrats. But I think there's just a whole lot going on right now in Washington, and people are maybe not paying attention as much. And we're small potatoes compared to, the oil industry or the energy industry or, the telecommunications industry. I mean, they've got lobbyists all over the place, and, you run into them everywhere. And, we've got 2 or 3 people running around town trying to say, hey, will you read our bill? And, we'd love to have you co-sponsor. We'd love to have you sign on. And we think it's really important. But trying to set up meetings with the congresspeople or their staffs. Interestingly, there are a whole lot of people who've signed on to this that you wouldn't expect would sign on to this, because you would think that maybe they would have an issue or a problem with it. But come to find out, they've got children from IVF. They've got grandchildren from IVF. Okay, I mean, this really could be a big unifier type bill, because realistically, who is opposed to people becoming parents and having families? I mean, I can't relate to people like that. Unfortunately, I don't encounter people like that.
Yeah, thank you so much for just the work you're doing. Number one,
yes.
I think it's really, really important. And
thanks for what you're doing, because you give me the opportunity to be able to get the word out about something that's so important to me, which I just so appreciate more than you know.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
We will make sure that we put all those links that you mentioned in the show notes so folks can get connected. And to our audience, thanks again for yeah, spending some time with us. And remember, keep your conversations not left or right, but up. And we'll see you next time. Take care.